This is episode 10 of the Nobody Yet podcast. I'm recording this on January 30th at 9:57 p.m. So one contingency of how good this podcast becomes will be a function of how I'm able to genuinely express my feelings at the given points of time as I'm recording this podcast. And that does pose a certain difficulty to me because there's like some things that I definitely don't want public. And there's also some things that are definitely harder to express or harder to at least put elegantly in a good way and for it to actually be presentable to an audience or my future selves at any point in time. Now, that in itself is kind of difficult to square. And I guess the logic I've been using is that, well, if I don't become successful and I don't do anything with my life, it's perfect because then no one will listen to this podcast anyways. So even if I spill my deep, darkest secrets, no one's going to hear them anyways. On the flip side, if I do become successful and let's say this podcast does become a good public journal of my thoughts and patterns before I achieved any success, then I would definitely want to show everything of myself at that specific point in time in my past. I want to show my genuine thoughts. Now, the flip side to all this is that, well, it doesn't really matter whether I fail or succeed in the future, because I for sure will find the genuine recording of my thoughts and reflections to be very valuable in the future, no matter where I am and what position in life. So in many ways, this podcast is a bet on its valuability to myself, which is a sure bet, and the flip side, which is there's only like upside there of this podcast will be valuable to other people if they do want to learn more about me, or maybe even just have a friend to accompany them throughout life as they go. So my goal with this podcast is to be as genuine as possible at any given point in my life, which is recorded and seen through these episodes. Now, if that kind of goal is to be genuine and authentic, it's actually pretty difficult to do so. A good example is actually right now. Right now, I'm actually pretty compressed in the many things I have to do. I just came back from a ski trip for the past 4 or 5 days, and work piled up. And I also have many other like social obligations with friends, with other different people that I need to see. So my time in general is just very compressed. So hypothetically, if I didn't actually do this podcast, I would probably just work tonight, and that would probably be a good deal of work to make me feel better about my pace and where my positioning is at in terms of progress. But because of this obligation I have to this podcast, I'm kind of obligated to record. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I should just kind of shoot my shit for like an hour and just call it quits. But it gives me a good chance to document my thoughts at this specific time in a point of stress and in a point of chaos in life. It really shows kind of my mental state of handling that pressure at this age, which hopefully I'll get to see change over time and hopefully is documented by this podcast. Now, I probably say that every episode. I probably give that blurb every episode, but that's my thoughts. And I think this is a cool diary of recording kind of these transformations and these reflections over time, and it's definitely expressed a little bit better than just writing, where I kind of fiddle with the English for half the time. Maybe not a thesaurus, but definitely staring at the sentence structure of what I want to write out. So this is definitely a more casual way and more natural way of doing it versus something that's much more polished. Now, I mentioned right now that I'm pretty stressed. And there's a lot of things that are pulling at kind of my attention right now. In many ways, it feels like I'm driving at like 300 miles per hour or something. I'm shooting in all cylinders in like many aspects of life. I'm working a lot at work, of course. I documented that I just joined a company. Of course, now it's been like 3 months, so it's not as, say, like onboarding like. So now it's like setting my role, having some defined responsibilities, and now executing upon those responsibilities. There's friends. So now being in New York for a good amount of time, I feel like I developed much more friends that now I just need to like just tend to spend time with, not because I feel obligated per se, but because I actually want to. I love these people. So friends, there's definitely some relationships as well that I'm also growing a little bit more, and that also requires more time. gymming, fitness has always been huge in my life, and that requires like some consistency there, or not some consistency, a lot of consistency there of a constant 1.5 hours at the gym. And of course there's all like the transportation and the eating aspect of it as well to maintain good strength, but also to look good in the mirror for myself and kind of help my confidence. On top of all this, there's like other pursuits like this podcast, where even though it's much less time comparison to everything else, it still requires some time, and it still requires some thought and delegation to think about how I should be approaching this task and how I should fit this into the rest of my day. So there's a lot of things that I'm really focused on right now, and sometimes it definitely feels like I'm falling apart when I'm trying to balance all my pursuits at the same time. Today, as I was walking back from the gym, I had a feeling of anxiety. There was like a constant like sinking feeling that I felt as I was walking back from the gym. I felt like my heartbeat was quickening, even though I was just walking casually, maybe still at a fast pace, albeit. Felt like even though I wasn't listening to music, my mind was just running on fumes, thinking about the next thing I need to do, followed by the next, and how I'm gonna cook and fold clothes while also do work. And then, I gotta do this podcast, which I'm doing right now. But all the things I'm trying to balance and how to really put those away and execute them at the expectation that I really wanted to be executed at. So kind of meeting my own expectations. And this anxiety feeling is not comfortable. It's really not pleasant. I think anyone who is experiencing anxiety would know that is definitely not ideal. But for me, even though like this feeling is really uncomfortable, and there's very much like a love and hate relationship that I have with this. Obviously, like the hate is pretty apparent. The hate is like, well, I can't like chill, and like there's like some panic in my soul that I just am experiencing on the day-to-day basis. But the love side is that this anxiety for me is kind of like an indicator of being tested. I wouldn't have anxiety if I'm not being pushed to the limit of my current abilities. And perhaps my limit of my current abilities right now is not necessarily what I want in terms of intensity in one area, but kind of more of a middling intensity in all areas, which I must delegate and kind of cut things out and focus on things a little bit better. So it was kind of like a test. At least that's how I see it. And that's where my love of it comes from. It's the feeling of pursuit and the feeling of achieving progress that I also love a lot, which also comes associated with this high feeling of anxiety of, oh my God, I need to get so much things done. And then, of course, as you get things done, that's like the definition of progress, and making progress in a career or in fitness or whatever, that in itself is very rewarding. So it's very much a love and hate that I have with this feeling of anxiety. And when I think more of it, it's probably stemming from childhood. All throughout high school, university, and even post-university, I really just centered my life around work. I didn't really identify myself with leisure. And this is kind of moving beyond the conversation about anxiety, but towards this general panic, like this general stress. It's definitely very apparent to me, and I kind of put a thumb to it now, recently, as I was reflecting of last year. But I have a very strong type A personality. For me, it's always been go, go, go in every aspect. So high school, it was go, go, go in terms of working for university applications. And back then, my goal was like to get into Ivy Leagues. So that was precisely my goal from a average, mediocre high school with no enrichment program. So very ambitious goal, and very type A in terms of actually actively studying for the SATs, the ACTs, starting like different clubs to actually stack my extracurricular portfolio. Funny enough, grinding really hard in terms of school, studying, make sure my averages were in the top 90s, just trying to bulletproof my application for what I can, at least coming from that situation, which is not definitely preferable when applying to like an Ivy League institution, where there's a lot of course, now I know feeder schools and other enrichment programs that actually prepare kids earlier on. Now, actually choosing a university program, a big reason why I ended up choosing engineering science at University of Toronto was robotics. Like I had a robotics specialty and I wanted to go in robotics back then. But another aspect of it was I wanted to see what smart people was like. I wanted to see what the best of best was like. And if I could actually hang with the best of the best. It's kind of like a test of myself of how I could actually carry the workload. The program I chose was notorious for its high workload and its like high dropout rate. Of course, this dropout rate is not just associated with people failing out, but also people losing interest of the program and making the calculus of this program is not worth my time, and kind of like the work input that I need to give is not worth my output that I think I'm getting. So there's also that calculus is present, so not everyone is failing, but that is also like a testament to how much work that just needs to be done in order to actually stay in good standings with the program. But I chose the program because it was difficult, and there was like a YouTube video that I think alumni or like grads did that actively tells prospective high school students to not go into the program, which weirdly enough for me actually attracted me to the university program a bit more. Post-university, I think post-university is a time where everyone feels like they have more freedom. Where university has the freedom of you don't have to go to class, so you have like freedom in the whole 24 hours if you want. We also didn't sleep that much back then, but in the whole 24 hours if you want. Work is kind of like there is some defined interval in which you will be busy, which is like during work. But at least now you have more cash flow, so you could kind of do anything you want. You could travel on the weekends. You could go get drinks after work. You do whatever you want, basically outside of work hours. And that's the freedom that you get for university or like after university in the professional world. Now, fortunately or unfortunately for me, I still got to express my type A personality. And for me, when I first joined the trading firm out after work, I needed to figure out what to do with my time after work. So what I ended up doing was studying a quantitative finance textbook with the goal of being like a quant trader. So I did that for like a solid half of the year. And if you got to ask me what I learned from that, I learned probably more than anything else that I don't want to be a quant trader. I was just like learning math that honestly was pretty cool, but I kind of just fell out of love with it. I just kind of got a little bit bored with what I was learning. So that definitely was not ideal, but it's like kind of an illustration of this type A personality where there's a lot of things that I want to accomplish, chiefly realizing more of my potential and what I believe what I can do. Truth be told, I feel growing up in university and then after university, there's never really been an extraordinary amount of external pressure. It's always been internal for me. My parents didn't really exert that much pressure for me in high school. University had the safety net of if I did badly, I could just drop out into any other good standing engineering program in University of Toronto. And then, of course, outside of work, I didn't have to study quant trading, even though I was at a trading firm. I could just do software and be perfectly fine. So there's never been that extraordinary like external pressure. I always say it's like other people tend to seem like they have pressure from someone else pointing a gun at them to perform. For me, it seems like I point a gun at my own head and I tell myself to perform. Except that gun is not just a handgun, but is like a tank that I'm going to shoot myself with. And what I'm shooting myself is I'm shooting my own like ego and my own confidence and my own security and my own beliefs of my future and my potential. So there's always like this building internal pressure that I have for myself. And it's the expectation to perform and excel and the expectation to be great. And when I think about it, there really are two sides that stem or that are the source of this pressure. And I've been thinking about these two sources a lot recently. Recently as in like the past 4 months or so. I always wondered why I felt like I had an obligation to myself to do well. And I think I narrowed it down to two aspects. On one side, and this is the more positive aspect, on one side there's that joy that I get from achievement. There's like this increase in confidence and euphoria that I get when I make progress and when I achieve something that I thought wasn't that achievable from before. This is like getting a good GPA in first year uni, or getting internships or something like that, where it feels like I'm making my younger self proud. When I was younger and middle school, and I was very mediocre and was definitely not destined to do anything great, I somehow found the probably delusion, that belief that I could go somewhere in life, and because of that delusion or that confidence, whatever you call it, I just started working really hard. And in many ways right now, it feels like I'm just serving that inner child of me, of showing that inner child, showing that like middle school year old person that it was all worth it in the end. And that working hard back then telescope to me working hard now, and I'm still making progress. I'm still achieving. So all the effort ever since I was 14 was like not gone to waste. I do not rest on my laurels, and I realize as much as my potential as I could in this kind of period in time, and I'm continuously growing and striving in that regard. So this is kind of like the positive aspect, where it's like the confidence that I can achieve what I want to achieve, and that I want to realize more of that potential for my younger self and just for my own enjoyment. Now, the flip side is definitely very much negative. I think the flip side to confidence is insufficiency. I feel like there's a fear of being insufficient to myself. This kind of goes along the conversation of not having external pressure. It's all internal for me. So it feels like I fear that I will be not good enough for myself. And I actually might be a loser that I always thought I was. Like, I might be a little bitch. And I might be kind of like that little kid from the same little kid that started working hard. But I actually might be like that little kid who actually wasn't destined to go anywhere if he didn't start working hard at that age. And kind of like this negative fuel I see really pushes me very hard in a lot of aspects. It kind of pushes me to fulfill the sense of validation of myself, of like having a purpose of existing. There's times in the gym where like I'm tired or my body is sore, and then how I flip the switch and how I kind of like start using that like insufficiency feeling, no matter how toxic that fuel is, but how I start using it is I would look in the mirror and start like thinking about how bad I look, or how small I look, or how weak I am. And then I would kind of start routinely going through the word patterns that I use. Things like, oh, you're a little bitch, or like how small you are, or you fucking weak. Kind of those phrases. And that would push me through those difficult workouts. And finally get to the end where, of course, I feel that confidence and kind of that euphoria that actually made it through a really tough time. So in this regard, there's just two sources where my expectations for myself and this external or this internal pressure comes from. It's the positive of confidence, kind of like the angel, and then there's the devil of I fear that I won't be good enough for my own evaluation for myself. And I noticed that the combination of these two is really potent, is a really strong fuel. It definitely helped me propel myself out of what I saw as mediocrity back then, even though I didn't know what the fuel was. I just knew the feelings that I tapped to kind of start working and to focus on work despite having other distractions around me, which I didn't succumb to, or maybe I didn't like invest in. These are things like going out with friends or having more like school spirit and things like that. Maybe those are not distractions. That was a mischaracterization. But it's kind of like why I did invest in those and instead invested just on continuously working. Now, even though I used like these two sources of fuel, and even though like the fuel is like supremely toxic, like I feel the constant like edge in me, as if I don't spend every waking moment in my life trying to be productive, that I'm just simply like wasting my life. That is not a good feeling to feel. But nevertheless, that is still kind of like a silent voice at the back of my head that's constantly egging me to go on. For if I don't, I would be displeasing my younger self, and also I would be actually a little bitch that I actually thought I was. But regardless, despite it being kind of this really potent fuel, objectively speaking, like when I compare what I have achieved now and what I have now to what I would have achieved if I stayed mediocre and I didn't invest, or I didn't like use this fuel to get out of mediocrity, is definitely like night and day. My life is way better now across like almost every metric than it was compared to what my life would have been if I stayed on the path of mediocrity. Definitely the amount of money I make right now is definitely not even something I dreamed about like back then. I didn't even know I could make this much at this age. I didn't know I could meet the people I have met at this age. I didn't know I could live in New York, or have lived in Chicago, or lived in Toronto, or intern at different companies. I didn't know I could achieve the strength that I have, or had the fun experiences and traveled like I did. There's so many things that I've done that I never could have even dreamed about back then, when I was kind of on the destined path of mediocrity. And these are things that are, objectively speaking, much better than that path. But then there's the question of like, yeah, even though on the outside it looks much better, what about the internal state? And I've come to the conclusion, or at least the belief, that the internal state that I currently have, or at least I have had in the past, I guess more than a decade now, ever since I started working when I was 14, this internal state has not been like positive or admirable at all. There was like this, like I mentioned before, this silent perpetual torment in the drive to be better. And that silent torment is not something I would definitely wish on anyone else. Like the torment comes in the most casual of ways. It's when I'm walking to the bus or I'm walking home, I find myself walking faster or almost breaking into a run because I'm thinking about all the time I'm wasting by just walking to my destination. It's the times where I'm thinking how to place my everyday actions into an efficient sequence of orders so that I could actually finally start working as soon as possible. An example is like today. Today I had a lot of errands I needed to do. I had meal prep. I had to fold my clothes. I had to work out. I have to do this podcast. I have to text. I have to prepare like restaurants. I have to find restaurants, brunch spots for my friends. And I remember walking home today and I was kind of like running home. And as I was running home, I had no music in. And I was just thinking about how I'm going to juggle all these things at the same time. So I'm going to cook in parallel to folding clothes. And then when I'm done folding clothes, and if my cooking's not finished, and I'll also text. But then I also need to cook my meal for tomorrow for lunch. So I'm going to cook an extra meal. And as I cook the extra meal, I'm going to eat. So now my eating time is not going to waste. And then as I'm finished cooking that and I finish eating, then I could do dishes. I could shower. And then I could immediately start writing and then jump into this podcast, which is what I did. So there's kind of like a militant aspect to it of this pressure of making every moment productive that I have, and that is a result of this silent perpetual torment that I have. So this internal state is probably not admirable at all, even though it has obtained the outsized returns that I have, which are admirable in that regard. And I always tend to think about this internal state and the difference in my life when I interact with people from my old high school. I mentioned before, recently I came back on a ski trip, and on the ski trip I got to catch up with a couple of my close high school boys. I have a close circle of friends that I talk to and I've known for like decades now. So it's always cool to hear through them like the updates of other people who came from the same place that I did, from the same high school, the same city that I did. And since me and my boys keep in touch, and they semi keep in touch with people from my background, they're still in the city, or at least they're still in the area, so they're still in the loop. I kind of get that like secondhand knowledge from them, and it's also like super really cool just to catch up on what everyone else is doing. But as I kind of hear what people are doing, what other like acquaintances or people that I know by name are doing, there's always like this like tang, this subtle feeling of envy that I have for like a simple life. It's the simple life or the mediocre life that I could have had. It's working in a government job, which is a chill 9 to 5 job. It's living in a quiet, safe city without needing to know what else is out there. Maybe I could like travel to New York every once in a while or travel to Asia every once in a while. It's having lifelong friends in my immediate circle, not feeling the pressure to make new friends all the time. It's having the freedom from personal expectations that I certainly can't imagine right now. So I always have this feeling of envy for people living that simple life. And while I have this envy, and in some regards I do want to be like them, I know deep down I just can't. Like maybe it's something in me, whether it be genetic or behavioral from a young age, that I can't just sit around. It would feel like life, which is something so precious, is really just going to waste if I were not to use life and the time that I have in an attempt to reach higher for more things. And things I want to say loosely, not in terms of like money and status, but things as in like things that give me interest. But not to reach more things of interest, and not to realize more of my potential of what I believe I can do, whether it be career, fitness, interests, hobbies, friends, family, etc. So just kind of like always that feeling of pushing for more. And while I don't necessarily know if this like pushing for more in this pursuit, this self-inflicted stress will make me happy, I definitely know for sure that not pursuing these things, living that chill life, at least for me, would be an absolute guarantee for not being happy. So there is kind of like a sense of acceptance that this life of stress and this fast-paced life is the life for me, because otherwise I won't be happy. I'm not sure if I will be happy, but I know for sure I won't be happy if I go down the other route. And that's kind of like just the commitment to this pursuit of what I have. Now, the type A personality that I have, which is like heavily linked to pursuit, ambition, the thought of always needing to get better at everything. The importance of monitoring a type A personality has definitely shifted from my school days to early adulthood. I feel like during school, it was very valued to be good at everything. At least that was the game on university applications. It was playing the sports, it was having the clubs, it was having a good mark, it was having good SATs, and it was trying to like get all of those up in a bid to have the strongest application. Try to get a crack at one of the good institutions in the States. Well, in early adulthood, it's definitely a little bit different. It feels like I could no longer conquer everything in my path at the same time. Maybe part of it is like due to getting older and my body's just like less flexible than it was at 18 or 17 or however I was young back then. Or maybe it's like the time sinks or more time commitments that I have now in my peripheral vision. But there's definitely a higher shift now towards prioritization, and specifically not just like prioritization of like, I'm going to be good at this and then I'm going to be okay at this and okay at that. But now it's like actively choosing to ignore things, or perhaps actively choosing to be bad at things that I was previously good at. This is definitely extremely painful. It's painful when a lot of my identity has been lodged into so many of my pursuits as a kid. When I was, I don't want to say forced, at least like when I forced myself to be good at everything. An example is fitness. And I think you'll notice if you listen to these podcasts, fitness will be a constant theme that will come up in all my podcasts. And my value of fitness like stemmed from like 13 or whatever when I first got my gym membership. I always joke with my partners that the gym will always be my first love, because the gym is what gave me the initial burst of confidence to pursue things. It was what gave me the initial body, the initial activity that made me believe that things were possible. I remember the time when I first benched 135 pounds at 17 or something. I was so happy. I just couldn't believe it. I remember when I saw my first 2 impressions of abs on my stomach. That was like a surreal feeling. Another one was the striations on my chest. Obviously this was a little older, but striations during my chest, that was also like another feeling of, oh my God, look at me. So fitness has always been there as a big part of my identity and my confidence and my security of who I am as a person. And it's difficult to give something like this away when there's other things that I know I must be prioritizing at this moment. The difficulty in early adulthood, it seems, is figuring out how to swallow the pill and just suck at something. The solution is like probably reframing and just shifting value and identity to what is the priority and what should be focused on. But that's still like definitely hard to like square that circle for me right now. That's something that I'm still trying to figure out how to do in the most ergonomic and the most, maybe not optimal, but effective way that I still don't lose my full sense of self. Maybe my example of fitness is if I give up fitness for example, work, and that I'm not going to turn into like a big slob or something that can't even lift 135 pounds or something like that. So it's figuring out how to best bounce off everything and accept that I will be mediocre for my own standards at fitness and actually maybe regress in that sense. When I think about my current schedule right now, it's pretty packed. I wake up around 7:30 and then go to the office at 8:30. I usually leave at around 4:30. I go to the gym. I hit the gym. I get home at around 7:30, to which then I could shower, shave, eat, and then by that point it's like 8:30/9. And at that point, I then do more work, or I do things like this podcast until I have to go to sleep at around 10:30, which I then like pick up a book and I read. Now, obviously 10:30 is like a rough time. Usually it extends to like midnight if I'm working or I'm doing something that I want to keep doing. But this is all to say that that schedule is like very, very routine and at this point anchored for the main goal of being like more and more productive. My schedule during the weekends are not as militaristic or militant. It's definitely a little bit looser, but it's still centered very much around productivity. Usually at nights, I will go out with friends. But during the morning, I will wake up, do coffee. I'll probably wake up at around like 8 just because my circadian rhythm forces me to wake up at that time, no matter how late I sleep. I wake up, get caffeine, start doing more work until I need to like see friends. So that might be like dinner or that might be later at night. But essentially it's just doing work during the weekends as well. And when I think about my schedule, it's difficult to figure out what I should be taking away and what I would be okay taking away, and how to like keep my identity in place, or keep at least my self-worth in place. Maybe not my self-worth specifically in certain topics, but how to keep at least my self-worth alive and my confidence alive in who I am as a person. Now, I wonder how much of this like type A ambition feeling is just due to my current age right now. Like I mentioned before, I'm 25, definitely still very young relative to other people, or relative to like the whole progression of life. I still have like 3/4 of life to live. So it's still very young. But I wonder how much this type A personality is a function of this youth. I hear ambition usually dies as we get older, and there's more things that we could put value or get an identity from. A main one, it seems, when we get older is definitely family and kids. It's having that significant long-term partner, and also having just kids to raise, reflections of self, people that we get to invest in and make lovely moments and memories with. And when I think about getting older, there is like that certain fear that I have in terms of losing the feeling of ambition. For me, this type A personality has always been there for me. Like I like to think of ambition, which of course motivates the type A personality, but I like to think of ambition as a friend. It was a friend that was always with me ever since I was 14. And back then in middle school and high school, mostly in high school when I started working hard, I felt very lonely a lot of the times. It felt like from my position, not a lot of people wanted to do what I wanted to do, at least the people in my vicinity. I definitely had role models of my age at that time, but they were not immediately like around me, so I didn't have access to them all the time, and I wasn't like inspired by them 24/7. I was around people that definitely didn't align exactly with what I wanted, and people or faculty in that school as well also didn't really nurture my ambition that I had. So there was like a feeling of loneliness that I had, and ambition, being my friend, always felt like it was there for me. Like even in my lowest moments, it felt like it was someone I could talk to, someone I could console, and someone to always motivate me to give me a hand when I fell down, to continuously push, and to grow and to get out of the sticky situation that I was in. When I felt really melancholic and sad after like failures or breakups and heartbreak, I felt like it was ambition that always brought me back up in the end. Sure, I had more and more friends, more and more quality friends later on in university and in early adulthood. It's still like those late nights alone where it's just me in my bed staring at my ceiling that feels like ambition talks to me, and it tells me to get back up and to keep pushing and to keep going, and that I'll be okay if I believe in myself and just keep going as if nothing happened. And in a certain regard, when I think about growing up, I fear losing this friend that's taken me so far in life, and for sure that I've developed a longing for, since I've been positively rewarded for being its friend for so long. Now, with the year being 2025, and now that I'm 25, it feels like there's a timer. It feels like there's a timer to realize as much of ambition and my potential as possible. before like the feeling or before like the priorities of family becomes a much more dominant thought. I remember having a dinner with a couple friends last year, and we were talking about long-term partners and marriage, just casual topics that 25-year-olds talk about, probably just like gossip, except no, it's not just any gossip. It's long-term consequence gossip, I guess. But I remember one of them saying that if you really think about it, at 25, you have one more serious relationship until you're like 27. So you have like maybe one more serious relationship you could burn before you're 27 and you start finding who you're going to be with long term, assuming you're going to get married when you're 30 or around 30, and then have kids when you're like, let's say, early 30s or mid 30s. And that really put a pin into kind of like a timeline. It very much feels like I need to run as fast as possible right now to realize as much as possible before the idea of raising a family becomes much more important. Now, being in the age of 25, the environment or your surroundings also start to change a little bit too. Some of my high school friends recently got engaged, so that has been on my mind, and seeing them purchase a house or FaceTime their partner or talk about a future that they're going to have together with their partner is something that I just can't relate to. And something that, yeah, I long for a little bit. It's also a bit scary in terms of what I could then pursue and the time I actually have for myself to actually chase the things that I do want to chase. Several other acquaintances are already married, so it's kind of like there's even a larger extension of that feeling of being on a timer to like find a partner and raise a family. And I know that while like everyone has their own timeline, I can't help but feel like there's like supreme urgency in not only my work, but now also to like find a partner and start securing that future for whatever future family that I would have. Now, this is kind of where the type A personality kicks in. And the type A personality for me kicks in and says, I must absolutely excel at everything here. So it's excelling at what I currently already am pushing to excel at. It's being good at work. It's being good at fitness, is lifting as much weights in fitness. It's pursuing all my different interests, this podcast, writing, reading. It's maintaining good relationships with friends. It's meeting new friends. And so it's all this that I already have the expectations for myself to excel in, with the additional pressure of now I also need to invest time into finding a relationship and start building and start looking for potential wifey or something like that. So kind of like this type A personality doesn't really have a give in terms of what I could sacrifice. It feels like I must do everything, and I must do everything good. A big pain for me now, as of course you could probably tell, is figuring out what to let go, what I could hold more loosely, and how to like come into terms with not being as good in that given area anymore. That's something difficult that I'm still trying to play with, that I guess I'm still like trying to figure out. I don't really know the answer there. The flip side to excelling at all things as well is there's for me the feeling of need to be perfect, or at least not making an error. So I definitely do have a perfectionist streak, which I'm not sure if it actually results in higher quality work or more results, but it definitely results in much more torment that I have within me in terms of performing to my very high standards that I believe myself that I should perform in. And I've been having this thought of, I wonder what's the tipping point in terms of a type A personality and in terms of pursuit and in terms of being perfectionist, such that the inability to be a perfectionist or a perfect perfectionist of making no errors and to excel at everything, how much more pain that is causing and how much more unhappiness that causes in comparison to the amount of unhappiness that I would have had if I just lived a mediocre life. Like, there has to be a tipping point somewhere if I were to go crazy and trade everything away for excelling at everything. That I would also trade away happiness, the thing that I am shooting for in the first place by working for these things in the first place, that I really could have just circumvented by just not worrying and looking to live a quiet and peaceful life. I don't know if that all made sense, but it's maybe to sum it, it's how much more happiness I could have by living a chill life versus living a type A or having a type A personality and having that ambition that drives me to excel at everything that I have now. It's the striving and excellence is perhaps killing me faster than actually being mediocre or than actually not pushing towards whatever I want to push. I'm not exactly sure what the solution to this is. The solution, to be clear, the solution to dampening the type A personality in terms of relieving a little bit more stress or the constant, maybe not constant anxiety, but the frequent anxiety that I do have, and it's the constant torment of feeling that I'm not good enough. I have a couple solutions that I thought may be like in line, but I'll still have to like figure this out. But the first is definitely remembering that all the pressures that I exert on myself is by my own choice. Like, I choose to be busy. I don't have to be busy. I don't have to go work out. I don't have to see as many friends that I have to see. I don't have to do things like this podcast or read the books or write. I don't have to do anything. I can just work, come home, play games. It's a very simple life. But I choose to be busy. And I choose to subscribe to the game of always improving and getting better. The second is definitely just getting better to first choose what to suck at. And then secondly, to actually be okay sucking at that thing. I think this probably requires just a lot of reframing in terms of where I could extract value from. It's probably thinking or repeating to myself over and over again that I'm getting value from work, and this work defines me and gives me the validation to believe that I'm not a little bitch, despite me being weaker in the gym. So even though there's evidence that I'm being a little bitch because I'm getting weaker in the gym, the effort and the progress that I get from things like, for example, work or other things I'm pursuing validates me more and convinces me more that I'm not a little bitch, despite having kind of the prevailing evidence going against it of getting weaker or trading off whatever I'm trading off. So there's definitely a lot of reframing and telling myself over and over again of my identity in terms of solving that thing of choosing what to be bad at and then actually being okay with sucking at it. There's definitely the third thing is definitely living more in the moment. I have this understanding that I'm going to be 25 only once in my life. And this is a special time. It's going to be a time when I'm older, when I'm 40 or 55. I'm going to look back and think, wow, that was me at that age when I had the energy. I was reaching my physical peak. I had the courage to do a lot of things that I did. I had the proactivity to push. I didn't have responsibilities of a family or of aging parents or anything like that. I have the freedom, the audacity, and the confidence and the skill to pursue what I wanted to pursue. So this is a moment to enjoy. And I'm probably going to spend a lot of this time working. If indeed, when I get older, I lose ambition as my friend, I want to make sure that I remember as much of its impact as possible to who I was as a kid, to who I was as a young adult, or as a teen and then a young adult. I want to remember all the internal demons and angels that I faced as a result of being friends with ambition. I want to remember all the internal states that I had. For it is these internal states that, at least for me, makes my life feel much more colorful, despite my life feeling heavy and difficult. It is with this that gives my life so much excitement at this specific age. And I wouldn't trade this for a mediocre life, or for a quiet life, despite having some envy for that when I see it in other people. This is a special feeling that I have when I'm 25. This feeling of stress, this feeling of hope, this feeling of fear, this feeling of excitement for what could happen in the next week or the next month or the next year. So enjoy this moment. This moment is not going to last forever. Wrapping up in terms of solutions, there's definitely something I want to get better at. Maybe not now specifically, but throughout this year and as I get older, is definitely learning how to take a break. Right now, I have a frame that I think of everything in terms of productivity. Like, I went on the ski trip, not only to see my friends, which I definitely did, but also because it'll be a good break and then a good chance for me to be more productive when I get back. I chose to get dinner, not to just enjoy what I'm eating, but to actually give me the stomach, the energy, and the break that I need to then after go do more work. So it's framing things less in terms of productivity, but for its pure enjoyment. I should go on a trip just to enjoy the trip. I should eat food just to enjoy the food and to eat with people and learn more about people. It's trying to develop more of those type B personality traits that, at least right now, I'm certainly lacking. And I'm definitely feeling the pain of. But yeah, right now it's a really interesting point in time, and definitely one of my more stressed eras that I have in my life. And hopefully, A, everything works out okay. But B, I take away something from this for myself in terms of sharpening the solutions that I have and trying to apply it as best as I can, in the hopes of living a better life now and setting up a better life long term for me in the future. But yeah, that's it for this week. I definitely got a little bit deeper with this one. I don't know if my communication was all good when I think back on it, but my mind is a bit boggled right now with everything that I feel like I need to do, and with the expectations that I have on myself. So yeah, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week.